I know, I thought it started.
Don't move, Leroy. Morning, class. Welcome back. Today we're going to be going over chapter 6 on memory. Where are my glasses? Oh, okay. Sometimes I really feel like this. Sometimes I think I would forget my head if it weren't attached. I think we all have that, where we forget things. We get a little forgetful once in a while. So what I'm going to do today is I want to start off with a little memory test. So if everybody will take out a piece of paper and a writing utensil, either pen or pencil, whatever you have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say now, and I'm going to lift up the towel. And what you're going to do is look at the items on the tray and try to remember as many of them as you can. And then I'm going to say time, and I'm going to cover it up, and then pick up your writing utensil and start writing down as many of the items as you can remember. Okay, and then we'll talk about it afterwards and process what your memories are like too. All right, ready? Now, time. Now at this point of the class, we would be able to process the student's ability to recall, and they'd be actually surprised to see what they are recalling, and it'll come into play and it'll link together with sensory and with short-term memory. So we'll be talking about that. Okay, today I'm going to highlight some information on Chapter 6. We're going to start with a few memory definitions here, and then there's going to be a video with some more definitions, sensory and processing memory, and then we'll move into long-term memory. So listen up, folks. Take good lecture notes today. This will provide you with a quick reference for addressing the concepts and questions that are in your interview paper. And remember that interview paper is due September 17th. And there's a caveat in this assignment, and if you look at the assignment description, you'll find it there. It's really good stuff, so take good notes and it'll really pay off for you. Here we're going to look at memory is the mental processes that enables you to store, retain, and pick up or retrieve information over time. Encoding is the work of translating and transferring information in a way that it can be stored or retained by the memory system. Storage holds or retains the information in the memory that will be picked up later for use, and retrieval is picking up what's in storage when it's needed. I kind of think of a storage unit whenever I was creating this. So if you look on page 267, you'll find this picture of the brain if you want to look on your book, or you can check out here. These are the areas that have different memory jobs to do. This is the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex memory job involves the sequencing of events, but not the actual event. The amygdala, right here, this little green thing, translates the emotional aspects of memories. The medial temporal lobe, and it's actually on the other side here, you really can't see it in this picture. It translates and transfers new explicit memories to long-term memory. Then over here, this backside, is this cerebellum. And it takes on memories that involves movement or activities, doing things. And here, over here, this little shaped thing near the amygdala is the hippocampus, and it translates and processes new explicit memories to long-term memory. Take notes on this video, please. It will really help you to do that.
All right, we are going to be talking about memory in this unit, and this is a good introduction. Viewing a familiar scene can trigger memories of people and events that you associate with that place. Some things we never seem to forget, like visual images such as the faces of family members and friends and basic information. Some of the physical skills we learn, like walking and swimming, can last a lifetime. Much of what is stored in our memory was stored there with no conscious effort. Sometimes it only takes a visual image or sound or an odor to bring back a memory. So we're going to talk about the 3 types of memory in this unit. We're going to talk about the 3 processes we use to store memory, and then the 3 stages of memory. And then we're going to talk about forgetting and learn some ways to improve your memory. Memory is the process by which we recollect prior experiences and information and skills learned in the past. And there are different kinds of memory. Episodic memory is the memory of a specific event, like an episode. The event took place in the person's presence or the person experienced it. Your memories of what you ate for dinner last night and your last quiz are examples of episodic memory. Some events are so important that it seems as if a flashbulb goes off and we photograph it in every detail. And these are called flashbulb memories. For example, like the attacks of 9/11 and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. A lot of people, for them, that's a flashbulb memory. There are several reasons why certain memories become etched in our minds when the flashbulb goes off, and one reason is the distinctiveness of the memories. We pay more attention to events that have special meaning for us, and such events usually arouse powerful feelings. General knowledge that people remember is called semantic memory. For example, we remember that George Washington was the first president of the United States. And unlike with episodic memory, we usually do not remember when we acquired the information in our semantic memory. We probably can't remember the first time you learned about George Washington, for example. 2 more examples of semantic memory. You remember the alphabet, but you probably don't remember where, when, or how you learned it. You also know that humans need oxygen, but you may not recall learning this piece of information. Most of what you learn in your classes at school become part of your semantic memory. And these are both examples of explicit memory. Explicit memory, explicit memory, right here, are things that are clear or clearly stated and explained. So an explicit memory is a memory of a specific information. This information may be autobiographical or episodic, or refer to general knowledge or semantic. Implicit memory, however, is the opposite of explicit memory, and these are things that are implied or not clearly stated. Implicit memories consist of the skills or procedures you have learned, and these might include throwing a ball, riding a bike, skipping rope, swimming. Skills like typing, using a computer, playing a musical instrument, and driving a car are other examples. Once a skill has been learned, it usually stays with you for many years. Even if you do not use the skill for a long time, you're unlikely to forget it. Once skills have been learned, they tend to stay remembered for many years, perhaps even a lifetime.
Okay, so with that, we have some more information on sensory memory. And sensory memory is extremely brief. It stores information about the environment, and each of our senses has its own memory. Short-term memory information on short-term memory was gained by a psychologist by the name of George Miller in 1956 in a paper called The Magical Number 7, Plus or Minus 2. And Miller reported the capacity of our short-term memory was limited. So short-term memory is working memory that recalls up to 7 items plus or minus 2, as his paper stated. Temporarily stores information from sensory memory and information from long-term memory. This is where we get our telephone numbers, like there's 7 numbers in it, 3 and then 4, or where we get like Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Our short-term memory can most accurately recall 7 bits of information up to 9. So what happens when short-term memory storage is full? Well, new information is encoded and bumps out the information that's been stored and is replaced with new information. Long-term information stores potentially unlimited amounts of information for up to a lifetime. It's focused and meaningful information. So, how can I increase my short-term memory, you ask? By maintenance rehearsal. That's consciously repeating information. Do any of you do this before taking an exam or before making a speech? I know that I have, just going over the information over and over. Another way is through chunking. And no, I'm not talking about getting chunky by eating at McDonald's. I'm talking about chunking groups of items together, like your social security number, which has 3 digits, then 2, then 4, like 1, 2, 3, 9, 8, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can repeat it and say it easily. It's smooth, it flows off good, it's easy to remember. Or your license plate number is 3 digits, a space, and another 3 digits. Checking information is often separated by spaces or hyphens to make it easier to recall. I want to read you this prologue on page 231. It's called The Drowning. Elizabeth was only 14 years old when her mother drowned. Although Elizabeth remembered many things about visiting her Uncle Joe's home in Pennsylvania that summer, her memory of the details surrounding her mother's death had always been hazy, as she explained. In my mind, I've returned to that scene many times, and each time the memory gains weight and substance. I can see the cool pine trees, smell their fresh, tarry breath, feel the lake's algae green water on my skin, taste Uncle Joe's iced tea and fresh squeezed lemon. But the death itself was always vague and unfocused. I never saw my mother's body, and I could not imagine her dead. The last memory I have of my mother was her tiptoed visit the evening before her death. The quick hug and the whispered, "I love you." Some 30 years later, at her Uncle Joe's 90th birthday party, Elizabeth learned from a relative that she had been the one to discover her mother's body in Uncle Joe's swimming pool. With this realization, memories that had eluded Elizabeth for decades began to come back. The memories began to drift back slow and unpredictable, like the crisp, piney smoke from the evening campfires. I could see myself, a thin, dark-haired girl, looking into the flickering blue and white pool. My mother, dressed in her nightgown, is floating face down. "Mom? Mom?" I asked the question several times, my voice rising in terror. I started screaming. I remember the police cars, their lights flashing, and the stretcher with the clean white blanket tucked in around the edges of the body. The memory had been there all along, but I just couldn't reach it. As the memory crystallized, it suddenly made sense to Elizabeth why she had always felt haunted by her vague memories of the circumstances surrounding her mother's death. And it also seemed to explain, in part, why she had always been so fascinated by the topic of memory. However, several years later, Elizabeth learned that the relative had been wrong. It was not Elizabeth who discovered her mother's body, but her Aunt Pearl. And other relatives confirmed that Aunt Pearl had been the one who found Elizabeth's mother in the swimming pool. Yet Elizabeth's memory seemed so real. Now, Elizabeth in this story, she's a real person. Her name's Elizabeth Loftus, and she's a psychologist who is nationally recognized and a leading expert on the distortions that occur in the memories of eyewitnesses. Loftus shares his personal story in her book, The Myth of Repressed Memory, False Memories, and Allegations of Sexual Abuse. And that's where we're going to go from here. We're going to talk about this. It'll help you with your paper. So, if you look on page 258, you can follow along with this. Talk about misinformation effect. It says here, the definition: when erroneous information received after an event leads to distorted or false memories of the event, as Elizabeth Loftus had said. There was a study done called Lost Mall, where Loftus and another researcher, Pickle, in 1995, had 24 participants in the study. They were given 4 written descriptions. 3 of them were accurate. 1 was a pseudo-event, which a pseudo-event is something that's not real. And the information was provided by these participants' parents. And so the event, what they were told is that they were lost in the mall when they were a child, 5 or 6 years old. And they were lost for an extended period of time. And they were upset, and they were crying, and they was rescued by an elderly person, and then they was reunited with their family. Now remember, this event never occurred. It wasn't real. And after reading the 4 event descriptions, each participant was asked to recall the details as much as they could and to write it down. 2 weeks later, they were asked again. And surprisingly, 6 out of the 24 created a full or partial memory of being lost at the mall. So that is the misinformation effect. If we look at, you can read these here, forgetting or misremembering, the true source of a memory, source confusion. I want to go to the schema distortion here. False or distorted memories caused by the tendency to fill in missing memory details with information that is consistent with existing knowledge about the topic. And that was a study that was done. It was on a psychology professor's office. After briefly waiting in the psychology professor's office, they were taken into another room where they were asked to recall what was in their office. And many of them reported items that wasn't even there. Phones, filing cabinets, books, pens and pencils, things that's normally in the office but purposely was not there. So this shows us and is consistent with the typical professor's, office, and their memory errors was caused by schema consistent missing details. Here are retrieval definitions for retrieval. Hints or prompts that assist the recall of stored memories. Failure due to inadequate or missing retrieval clues. This retrieval clue failure. Serial position effect. The tendency for better recall is found at the beginning and the end of the information. So that's where, like if on directions, you don't remember what's in the middle. You just remember the beginning and the end. Perspective theory, remembering to do something in the future. And that's a lot of times we give ourselves things to do lists and stuff like that. And decay theory, which includes forgetting memories because we don't use them anymore and they fade over time. And this is what we see typically with older people, and as we get older, we see this decay theory. I want to give you this little bit before we go, and this is how to improve your memory and focus using memory techniques. So, enjoy this video.
Focus your attention on the materials you're studying. Attention is one of the major components of memory. In order for information to move from short-term memory into long-term memory, you need to actively attend to this information. Try to study in a place free of distractions such as television, music, and other diversions. Utilize mnemonic devices to remember information. Mnemonic devices are a technique often used by students to aid in recall. A mnemonic is simply a way to remember information. For example, you might associate a term you need to remember with a common item that you're very familiar with. The best mnemonic are those that utilize positive imagery, humor, or novelty. You might come up with a rhyme, song, or joke to help remember a specific segment of information. Stay mentally active. Just as physical activity helps keep your body in shape, mentally stimulating activities help keep your brain in shape and perhaps keep memory loss at bay. Do crossword puzzles. Read a section of the newspaper that you normally skip. Take alternate routes when driving. Learn to play a musical instrument. Volunteer at a local school or community organization.
Now with this, I just wanted to say that remember that you have a memory journal due next Monday, and then work on this paper. Use these notes that you've taken today. Read up on that chapter. This is going to be a big benefit to your final exam. Have a great week.